They had gathered in a great hall of stone and metal, beneath banners stitched with blood and steel. The elite warriors of the Kyrex Dominion, the Falari Pact, the Shun Nexus, and others too ancient to name had assembled to hear war stories from every corner of the galaxy. They called it the Conclave of Blades. Combat veterans with centuries of experience spoke of campaigns on acid worlds, invasions repelled with plasma storms, and sieges broken by molecular entropy weapons. Each tale drew murmurs of respect, gestures of honor, and calculated nods. But when the next speaker was announced, silence followed. A human was to speak. A single, unadorned name echoed in the air. He entered without entourage, without ceremony. No war medals, no ornate armor. Just a plain, old uniform. Faded, functional. Scars on the face, the kind that weren't cosmetic. His eyes scanned the room once, and then dropped to the floor as if the others weren't worth staring at. For a moment, the assembly wondered if this was a mistake. Someone even chuckled, but then he began to speak. They had asked for tales of death. They had asked for stories of victory. The human offered something different. He spoke of home. They thought he was joking when he described it. A planet with gravity, just slightly heavier than galactic average. A breathable atmosphere poisoned regularly by volcanic eruptions, radiation spikes, and pollen storms. The oceans were filled with predators designed by what must have been a sadistic god. The land? Worse. Creatures that hunted by sound, by smell, by heat. Apex predators with serrated teeth and subdermal armor. And those were the animals. The planet itself was worse. He told them how lightning struck with reckless abandon. How molten rock flowed just beneath the crust and volcanic belts that never slept. Storms that flung ice shards like blades. Wind strong enough to tear flesh from bone. He listed all of this not as a complaint, but as a matter of fact. Not a single alien interrupted. Then he described the diseases. Parasites that fed on blood, brain, and bone. Viruses that mutated faster than your immune system could keep up. Fungi that took root in the lungs and flowered out the mouth. The worst part? Humans didn't just survive this. They evolved with it. The planet didn't kill them. It forged them. The assembly began to shift uncomfortably. This wasn't the introduction they expected. He described how children were raised not in nurseries of protection, but in environments where falling could break bones and wildlife could maim. He mentioned how their earliest stories were about death and fire and teeth, and how children learned early not to scream when afraid, because it attracted attention. The human was not smiling. He wasn't proud. It was just truth. One of the Falari elite finally interrupted, sneering, asking why any civilization would remain on such a suicidal planet. The human turned slowly and answered, because leaving was an option. No one interrupted after that. He shifted the tone and told them of the first alien invasion of Earth. A scouting party from a race called the Tlex landed in the Amazon basin, expecting light resistance. They lasted 47 minutes. Not against humans, against the ecosystem. One was swallowed whole by an anaconda. Another stung to death by hornets. The last tried to flee, only to fall into a spike trap, not one made by humans, just the natural structure of the rainforest floor. A second invasion came years later, more cautious. They landed in Siberia. Sub-zero temperatures cracked their armor seals. The cold made their blood gelatinous. A human child found one of them, still barely alive. The child dragged him through snow and ice, over miles of terrain, to a military outpost. The alien survived, barely. The humans took nothing from him. No tech, no ransom. Just a smile, a wave, and then they vanished into blizzard. That survivor wrote a report. It circulated across 12 star systems. One line was underlined in red. The child was smiling. That's when the assembly began to really listen. The human described combat not as glory, but as necessity. He spoke of humans hiding in mud for 3 days, motionless, to avoid thermal scans. He told of traps using simple materials, wire, acid, pressure, gravity. Tools that weren't tools. Rocks, sticks, fire. Every piece of the environment could be weaponized. Everything was a threat, and so humans learned to turn every threat back on its maker. He recounted a battle on the planet Zyrek. A platoon of human infantry had been sent in as fodder. Unofficially, Of course, their allied commanders expected them to buy time. Instead, they vanished into the rain. The enemy assumed they had been wiped out, until one by one, their tanks began to fail, their food spoiled, their electronics malfunctioned. Within 5 days, the enemy command collapsed from dehydration, infection, and what they could only describe as psychological collapse. The humans reappeared, untouched. They had been watching the entire time. The veteran paused. He said, "We didn't even fire a shot that week." A rust-colored alien with chitin armor shifted forward, intrigued. "How did you learn such warfare?" The human answered flatly, "We didn't. It's just how we live." He explained how war was not something humanity brought to the stars. War had always been at home, against nature, against each other, against the odds. The stars just gave them new theaters. The assembly expected stories of bravery, of self-sacrifice. What they got were tales of quiet resolve, of men stitching their wounds shut with barbed wire, of women fighting with broken ribs and winning, of medics holding a man's insides and while he continued to shoot. And none of them saw themselves as heroes, just people doing what had to be done. He described orbital skirmishes where enemy ships refused to engage humans directly, not because of fleet size, but because humans had once redirected a comet mid-battle to strike the enemy's flagship. No one knew how they did it. No one wanted to find out. He told of a mission on the planet Dorwin 9. The native flora released neurotoxins in reaction to sound. Humans used this against their enemies, planting decibel emitters throughout the enemy's camp, then watching from a distance as the planet itself wiped them out. "Why use bombs?" he asked, "when the planet is more efficient?" One soldier asked, confused, "But how do you live with such constant danger? Doesn't it break you?" The human was quiet. Then he said, "It does, but we rebuild." He didn't smile, didn't boast. He just went on, describing the way humans learn to operate under constant stress, constant fear, and still remain functional. He spoke of civilians who had survived citywide bombardments without formal training, organizing rescues, building shelters from debris, making meals from nothing but bark and boiling water. It wasn't just the soldiers, he said. It was everyone. The alien audience had no more questions, only silence. He then described how humans never stopped adapting, how pain didn't deter them. It taught them, how fear didn't paralyze them. It clarified purpose. He recounted how, after one battle, a human unit scavenged enemy tech under fire, reverse engineered it mid-combat, and turned it into a weapon against its original users. When the conclave resumed the following day, the atmosphere had shifted. The awe was still there, but now it came with edge, unease. Soldiers who had marched through antimatter bombardments and fought on gas giants now found themselves second-guessing every assumption they had held about humans. And yet, the veteran returned, again without ceremony, again in silence. This time, he didn't start with Earth. He began with the siege of Kratata's moon, a theater most of them remembered. The moon had been declared lost, its atmosphere breached, its population presumed dead. What none of them knew was that a small detachment of human engineers had been left behind by mistake. No food, no comms, no heavy weapons, just 34 personnel and 6 standard construction suits. The alien war councils had logged them as casualties, but weeks later, the entire orbital station guarding the moon went dark. A recovery crew was dispatched. They found the engineers alive, emaciated but functioning. The station's defenders? Gone. No sign of a firefight. No blood. Just every pressure seal and oxygen feed rerouted or sabotaged. Not a single human weapon had been fired. The humans had turned the station into a death trap using ventilation schematics and a stolen wrench. They didn't just survive. They took the enemy's stronghold. He continued. The Glorn Confederacy had deployed a full mechanized battalion on the moon of Drazek 4. Their vehicles were protected by nanoshields impervious to directed energy. The humans deployed nothing but foot soldiers. No air support. No mechs. No artillery. Observers assumed they were being punished, but the battalion was neutralized in under 72 hours. Not by brute force, but by starvation. The humans had blocked the groundwater sources, baited the local fauna to attack supply caravans, and used thermal drones to map every troop movement. The final report listed unsustainable living conditions as the cause of failure. The humans never directly engaged. They didn't need to. A soldier from the Shirin clade stood up and asked how these tactics weren't dishonorable. The human shrugged. Is survival honorable? The question lingered longer than the answer. He moved on to the Varrock Uprising, where a civilian colony of humans was targeted for extermination due to political affiliations. Their communication arrays were wiped, their oxygen processors damaged, and their emergency shuttles destroyed. Most thought they would surrender. Instead, they dismantled their own dwellings and turned them into kinetic projectors. Flinging sharpened debris with hydraulic pressure, they launched dozens of high-velocity projectiles at orbital vessels. They managed to puncture a corvette's fuel line. The resulting explosion took out 3 other ships. By the time the attackers landed, they were met not by civilians, but by organized resistance wielding scavenged tech and chemical weapons made from agricultural supplies. The colony still stands. The human paused and clarified. We don't need arsenals. We need time. He spoke of human prisoners of war who were left on a penal asteroid for re-education. The guards were automated. The humans weren't even bound, just monitored. Within 3 days, the internal systems failed. It wasn't sabotage, at least not directly. The humans began tapping the walls in rhythmic patterns. The frequency interfered with the sensors, causing cascading logic faults. One by one, the security drones turned off. The guards never saw it coming. The humans walked out, piloted an escape shuttle they'd never trained on, and broadcast a farewell transmission. You shouldn't leave humans alone with time, tools, or each other. Someone in the assembly murmured that it sounded rehearsed. The human nodded. Because we've done it before. A quiet fell over the gathering again. He spoke of biochemical adaptability. In a campaign on Ixon 5, the enemy used aerosol neurotoxins engineered to match known galactic genomes. They hadn't accounted for human unpredictability. Within days, the survivors began showing symptoms. But instead of dying, their bodies developed proteins that began to bind to the toxin and neutralize it. Human researchers turned the process into a counteragent and released it into the air. They then lured the enemy into that same cloud. What had once been a weapon now became a human advantage. He explained that humans didn't mutate with grace or predictability. They mutated chaotically, violently, sometimes even self-destructively, but always in pursuit of survival. One commander asked, "But what happens when your adaptations cost you more than they save?" The humans stared at him. "We've lost entire generations to progress. We adapt anyway." The room went quiet again. Then he recounted the incident on the ghost ship Arrow's Fall. A derelict cruiser was found drifting in the expanse. Boarding parties from 2 factions entered, but none returned. A human reconnaissance team was sent in as a 3rd attempt. What they found was an adaptive AI defense system that interpreted all organic life as threats. The humans didn't engage directly. They found the AI core, sedated their own life signs using cryohormones, then allowed themselves to be captured by drones. Once inside the core, they activated neural microspikes that stimulated brain activity in precise patterns, spoofing the AI into registering them as system maintenance. They disabled the ship from the inside without ever lifting a weapon. The after-action report included only one sentence under combat strategy: "Don't fight what you can fool." He described a moment from a lesser-known conflict on Titanus. 3. Where human forces were deployed to a swamp world crawling with genetically engineered war beasts. The enemy controlled the terrain. The humans had no maps. Their solution? Release their own blood into the water, saturated with pathogens developed from prior conflicts. The beasts, designed to be immune to native viruses, fell rapidly to foreign ones. The aliens in the audience began to understand. Humans didn't just survive battle. They weaponized the environment, their bodies, their failures, everything. A younger officer interrupted. "Why do you fight like this? It seems desperate." The veteran nodded. "It is," then added, "but desperation wins wars." He moved on to psychological warfare. There was a facility on Arden Station where humans were kept in solitary conditions. The idea was to break their sense of unity. But the experiment failed. The humans began sending coded vibrations through the walls. No training. Just tapping, humming, breathing in sync. When interrogators tried to isolate them further, they switched to blinking patterns, muscle tics, then silence, absolute unity in behavior. The interrogators left unnerved. A week later, the station AI flagged the entire human sector as a non-analyzable node. Their collective presence had become statistically unpredictable. The researchers abandoned the experiment, not because the humans escaped, but because their minds had become more terrifying than any force the station had defenses for. He ended that segment by saying, "We aren't chaos. We're what comes after,